Hello, and welcome to this edition of Public Affairs Public Access. I'll be your host and moderator, Quentin Wiltz with the League of Women Voters Speakers Bureau. This edition is brought to you by the League of Women Voters Houston Area Education Fund in conjunction with Houston Media Source. We have with us candidates in the local election in the Pearland area. We want to hopefully share with you their thoughts on this election as well as their stances and positions. If you would like to join in the conversation, I invite you to call the number. The number is 281-661-5626. We'd love to hear from you and hopefully ask some questions directly with the candidates. I also want to take a moment to, being election time, share with you the most valuable piece of information that you could have, and that is the League of Women Voters Houston Voters Guide. Very comprehensive piece that goes into a lot of detail on all the candidates up and down the ballot. There was a lot of effort put into this, and it is very helpful, and I encourage each and every one of you to read it thoroughly, and to be informed before you go to the polls. If you don't have this copy, you can visit lwvhouston.org, where you can download an electronic copy. Without further ado, we have with us this evening a couple of the candidates who are able to make it. I do want to note that Representative Thompson in the state representative race, District 29, did send a notice that said he'd be unable to make it to this forum due to personal reasons. And there are two candidates that are unable to make it as well, but they gave no responses. And that is for U.S. Congress District 22, Pete Olson, and Precinct 4 Constable, James Bronner. So I'd like to take a moment to introduce the candidates that are here, and that is John Floyd, candidate for State Representative House District 29, and Lance Willis, candidate for Constable, Brazoria County Precinct 4. So enough of me talking, gentlemen. We'll start with you, John Floyd. If you could, just give us an introduction about yourself and tell the voters a little something, what you hope to bring.
Okay. My name's John Floyd. I'm running for Texas House 29. That's the Texas House district that comprises basically the northern portion of Brazoria County. I am a father of 5. I've been married for 22 years. One of my biggest concerns in this upcoming legislative session is what's going to happen with education funding. We've had a lot of problems in our public school systems because of the Republican agenda to strip funding from our public schools, as well as some other tricks that they're trying to play to defund our public schools. And so that's one of my primary interests, is to focus on fully funding public education. I am also a criminal defense lawyer. I'm board certified in criminal law. I have been a critic of the criminal justice system for 20 years. I write a blog criticizing the criminal justice system and pointing out its positive attributes as well. But I'm very concerned with the criminal justice system and some reforms that need to be made. Because of all the high-profile shootings that we've seen recently, criminal justice reform is kind of finally up on the forefront, and I think it's kind of risen to the consciousness of a lot of people. And so now's the time for us to strike and really push through some comprehensive criminal justice reform to make the criminal justice system fair. My opponent has stood in the way of a fair criminal justice system, Mr. Thompson. And so that's one of the issues that really brought me to the scene. I knew about his record opposing a fair criminal justice system, as well as a lot of his other ultra-right-wing philosophies and his voting histories. And so I'm really hoping to bring a more progressive representative to the people of Pearland.
Okay. All right. And next, position, Constable, Precinct 4, Brazoria County, Lance Willis.
First of all, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this platform on. When I got the invitation, I so graciously accepted. Again, I'm Lance Willis. I'm running for Brazoria County Precinct 4 Constable Office. My area encompasses North Brazoria County as well as South Brazoria County. And this form is put on by Pearland. I get the west side of Pearland, most of the Shadow Creek, the Southern Trails. I do go on the east side of 288, picking up South Down, Southampton, Country Place, well, it's Country Lakes. I go all the way to Cullen, north of Hughes Ranch Road. So a couple of my platforms that I'm running for is a more progressive constable office. Currently, right now, it's that agency is left in the backfield. It's not progressing with the citizens, not progressing with the time. We live in a diverse, multicultural community, and none of our leadership is actually reflecting that. Mm-hmm. And right now, I think we need leadership that's more directly reflective of the citizens of our community. My biggest thing when I come to office is organizational development. I want to develop that organization to do more than it's currently doing. Currently, right now, it's only doing civil process. And I think that's cheating the citizens of Brazoria County, because right now, I've been a constable my entire law enforcement career. We can do more as constables. I want to bring in criminal patrol as well to get with these local municipalities and assist them in their patrol. More police officers on the street. We're going to act as a visual deterrent to deter crime that's coming in Brazoria County. With the influx in population, you're going to get an influx in crime. Let Mark Gibson walk by.
No, that's okay. So come on, it's pretty open. We ask that you take your mic, sir. So welcome, candidate, and after you could get set up, we'll let Lance finish, and then you can introduce yourself. So, sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. Basically, and another goal of mine is community-oriented policing. While I've been on this campaign trail now, I've met thousands of people, and through those thousands of people, I get the first thing is they don't know who their constable is. They weren't even aware that they had a constable office. And my thing as a constable, we're elected officials. Constables are elected officials. We work for the people. So once the administration has forgotten that it works for the people, I think it's time to hang up that badge. And right now, it's such a huge disconnect between the citizens as well as the community when it comes to law enforcement. We have to bridge that We have to bridge that gap. We have to heal that wound. And right now, that wound's not being healed. I want to be more visible, more present, and more accountable to the citizens of Brazoria County, where they can have a constable office they can call upon and actually know the constable, know that we have a constable, know that the constable office exists.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, and welcome, candidate. Could you just take a moment to introduce yourself,
Okay.
the position you're running for, and tell the audience a little bit about what you hope to bring to that office?
Okay. Well, I'm Mark Gibson, and I'm honored to again have a chance to, as been on the campaign trail, to speak with the citizens of District 22. I'm running for Congress, District 22, and I plan on bringing change to the district. What I tell most people on the campaign trail is very simply, is that I get a return on their investment. That my objective is very simple, to make their vote count, and they'll see real results. I'm a little bit about Mark Gibson. For those of you who don't know me, I was born and raised in Mississippi, a product of the foster care system, 2 foster homes I may add. Got a chance to save enough money to get here and take a 12-hour bus trip. And I was able to save enough money for first tuition payment at University of Houston. Go Cougs. They're not doing well right now, but I still stand behind them. A big Coug fan. And I had a privilege and honor when I signed up for ROTC, when I dropped tennis and as a PE credit. And the cadre approached me about applying for a 2-year national scholarship, Army ROTC scholarship, and which I won, and also a scholarship from the University of Houston that allowed me to get in-state tuition. The rest is history. I graduated in 4 years, and I received a commission in the United States Army as a second lieutenant. and served 30 years and just retired last year as a 06 colonel from the United States Army. Served 5 commands. I'm a graduate of South Texas College of Law. I'm a licensed attorney in the District of Columbia, and I'm also a member of the federal court, 7th District, Texas here. I'm also a graduate from the United States Army War College and received a master's in strategic studies. So again, to answer the question that you pose, is that my objective is to bring real change, real results. When I go throughout this district, what is very common is that most people either do not know the current congressman, or if they do know him, they cannot pinpoint one item or one particular thing that's of substance that the congressman has done. And I want to change that, and I want people to know that that's my congressman, and I know these are the things that we've done.
Well, that's a pretty good segue into what we can talk about next. And so most of the questions that I'm going to ask you are framed based on a recent poll taken by UT Politics. This was done in the early summer, around August or so, late summer. And they, through a survey, they surveyed Texans. And the top issues that Texans were concerned about were immigration, border security, political corruption, and the economy. So, you know, the questions that I'll be asking you pertain to those major categories. And also, you know, we can't leave out healthcare and education. I mean, those are all key components to what I believe, and I think what most of the voters believe, keeps Texas at the top of the nation's economy and jobs. And so the first question is, we'll tailor it to immigration. All right. So, you know, like I said, the poll stated that a majority of Texans support stricter policies on immigration. Can you advise your stance on immigration? And also to tie in, specifically for you, Mr. Gibson, is if either Hillary or Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump were elected, what policies would you support, why or why not? So the first one is advise your stance on immigration, and then given this election, if either was in office, kind of elaborate on that.
Okay, well, I think it's a good question. It doesn't come up a lot interesting in District 22 on the campaign trail, so that's I would say my position is very simple. I'm going to support a pathway to citizenship, like everybody else has had. I don't think we discriminate against any particular group. When you look at the makeup of this district based on the census count, in the Anglo population, District 22, I think Irish is number 1. British, so we have just a mecca of different cultures that blend into District 22.
Okay.
So the point is that, one, we're not going to discriminate against any particular group. We're not going to single out Hispanics over other groups. I think they deserve the same opportunity as everybody else when it comes down to pathway to citizenship. So I'll support that. When it comes to the question of which president, obviously I'm going to support the president that has the best value system and stand what's best for the citizens of the United States. I think we have to get beyond rhetoric and get beyond grandstanding and bigotry. And so I will not be supporting bigotry. I'm not going to support, wall for just noise. I'm going to support the president who's going to have the best conscience of the American people and have the right values that we identify with.
Okay. All right. And so now to kind of streamline that back a bit for locally here in the state, Mr. Floyd, what is your stance on immigration and border security? And what do you hope to accomplish while in the House?
Well, along with some of the things that Mark suggested, I mean, we have millions of undocumented immigrants in the country who are living good, decent, hardworking lives. In fact, most of our industries, one way or the other, rely on these people to work in this country. And most of these people, live in a way that is good for the country. They pay their taxes one way or the other. They buy goods and services from the community. And so I think we need to find a way from the state side to assure that, number one, that we can cooperate with whatever path that the federal government comes up with as far as a path towards citizenship, but cooperate as far as helping people come out of the closet, so to speak, so that they can be identified and so that they can have proper identification, so they're not fearful of local law enforcement arresting them for traffic violations. If they are law-abiding members of the community, they should be treated as guests, in my opinion, and as people that we need to help find a way to be integrated into the community instead of being ostracized in the way they are right now. So I think there's a lot of things the state government can do to exacerbate this problem, and I think that the current Republican ideology is doing just that, using hate and fear and language that demonizes the immigrants in this country, I think is causing a real backlash where we have a lot of people who may not be exposed to immigrants on a daily basis who are unjustifiably fearful of these people who have lived in this country sometimes for decades without any incident. And so I think one of the things that I am really running on is that we need to, one of the words that Mark used is we need to stop allowing our politicians to use bigoted and racist and hateful politics to try to gin up the base. And so I think if I am elected, one of the things that I intend on doing is condemning these politicians when they use this type of language. I think it's gone on too long. I think we need to point them out. We need to censure these politicians when they do this. We should not have a candidate running for president who is using bigoted and hateful language towards our immigrants. We shouldn't have a governor or a lieutenant governor in Dan Patrick who is demonizing immigrants in our country. We have to look historically. Latin America has been our neighbor forever. And, they have contributed to our economy and to our culture here in Texas. And so to demonize this group of people, I think has gone too far. So we really need to do everything we can to legitimize and acknowledge their existence here, find a way that they can live here without having to hide in the shadows, and then cooperate with the federal government and see if we can figure out a way to streamline their existence here so they can find a pathway to citizenship.
So we're going to come back to that because I want to challenge you on a couple things, but I'll let Lance kind of give your take. And so I'll give you a little bit more meat on this one because just last year, Governor Abbott said that he supports cracking down on local governments that ban police from asking about a person's immigration status. So given that information and everything you've heard so far and everything you've heard in the media and from the people that you're speaking with, in the role that you're looking to fill, how would you address some of these issues with immigration, with immigrants, people here legally or illegally, and also Governor Abbott's stance on, as a peace officer, asking that person, are you illegal or legal, or digging into that? So what's your take on that?
Well, currently on a local level, we don't ask immigration status. That's more of a federal level. But I'm in agreement with what these gentlemen said about a pathway to citizenship. With a pathway to citizenship, we have to be careful about certain words and certain labels that we put on certain groups. If a guy runs a red light, we wouldn't call him an illegal driver. He's just a driver. So when you put these labels on people calling them illegals, And that's a stigma that's going to stick with them. So automatically when people see these different groups of people, now they're labeled as being illegal. And I think times we have to be careful about putting these labels and stigmas on people by calling them illegal. So I think we should get a path for citizenship so everyone become a citizen.
Okay, all right. So kind of to take it back a bit, you mentioned that people that are here, and we talk about either you're a citizen or you're not a citizen. So you're here legally or illegally.
Right.
I don't think there's any question to that. But what would you say to the person that says, just in Pearland, I think there was a case where a person was, I don't know the proper term, but they were killed by someone who was here illegally.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So what do you say to that person and about, well, we need to have a pathway to citizenship, and we need to treat everyone like basically give them the same rights that they are here as citizens and the same treatment. What do you say to those people that challenge you on those specific issues?
Well, I would tell you, I mean, the reality is these are human beings that are in our state, right? And so if they break the laws, they are held accountable the same way a citizen is. And so, while we have to allow people to grieve and give them our prayers when they have someone who's killed, it should have no bearing where that person comes from that commits the crime. The fact that they're here illegally, is most likely not a contributing factor to the crime that has occurred.
Right. And I agree with John. I mean, clearly we cannot single out one particular group, right? I mean, we can have, other folks from other parts of the world here, right? And they may not have a citizenship, right? And so they would be in the same predicament as a Hispanic. So I think the issue is that what I think we're saying is that in this political climate, don't go and single out a certain group and claim that all our problems are on that particular group. All people who are here and maybe here illegally, right? I mean, they should focus on pathway to citizenship, and that's why I would support. I think I totally agree with John that the system takes care of regardless who you are. So either you're legally or illegally, you commit a crime, obviously law enforcement kicks in, and you're now against the laws of the country, and you're going to face whatever those consequences are going to be. And the same thing we apply for people who, they don't have to be from Mexico, they could be from some other part of the world, and we extradite them if necessary. So I think we got to get beyond the rhetoric and focus on what is fair and what's right and what's just for all people, because there are people.
But on the other side of that, I think some of the Texans feel that wouldn't it be less of a strain on our law enforcement agency to be able to deal with those people who are committing crimes if fewer people came here illegally?
Well, I think I'll quickly answer that. I mean, one, what we don't want to do is to come up with a label that says all of our criminal activity is caused by those who cross the border, right? I think that's a wrong step. That's a wrong approach. We don't say anything when they come and they help those in the valley, these farmers, right? And they pay pennies on a dollar for their help. You never hear anything about that. So the point is that they deserve the same right to citizenship as anybody else. I think the focus is that there needs to be a path for that. I think they need to be educated about that path, and if they want to stay in the country, that's what they need to do. We don't go after those students who come in from other parts of the world, India, you name it, with HB1 status, right? And they know the same. They only have a certain amount of time. They come here for study abroad, and they have to go back. So I think what we need to get beyond is rhetoric, that we're trying to get some mileage from it. I think that's the wrong thing to do. I think the right thing to do is put the rules in place, immigration reform, that makes sense and that's fair across the board.
And let's be fair, Quentin. Most of the crimes that are committed, especially in this part of the country, are committed by U.S. citizens. You know, to point the finger at one particular case and say, well, that bad act was committed by someone who is here illegally is really an attempt to inflame the issue and blame people who are undocumented here for being criminals. I mean, most of the crime that's committed here is not, you know, there's not a disproportionate amount of crime that's committed by, you know, undocumented people here in the United States. So it's not a reality, but it is something that these kind of, well, people are ginning up for political purposes to demonize this group so that people will be fearful and afraid and vote for this hardcore right-wing ideology.
I can't speak to that, but let's let's pivot to something else. We have another issue is I know currently locally is education, specifically in Pearland. We have on the ballot a bond, because we're talking about security, and I know just in a recent article that security was highlighted as one of the key issues and components in this bond election. So, you know, I think majority of people will agree, whether it be charter, private, or public, that education is a vital part of our society, and how we educate our kids is equally important. So I'll start from with you, Mr. Gibson. What do you hope to accomplish with regards to education, and what is your stance on federally mandating standards for students?
Okay, so a two-part question. So the first one, I'm going to support education opportunities that make sense. I don't think anybody.
What does that mean?
Well, so I'm about to touch on it. So
Okay.
I think what I know there was, you know, Bernie created a lot of energy with millennials and a lot of young people, right? You know, I came up time, like I said, I saved enough money, right? I purposely went to high school half a day and worked half a day so I could pay for tuition. I was told by the welfare agency in Mississippi that they were not going to send me to college, but they would send my sister to college. That is an issue, right? But that's back in, you know, the early 80s. But the point I want to make is that I don't think we need to provide free handouts. I think we need to, I will support programs, like I said, that would make sense, that provide education to students, right? But they have to do something in return for it. So we're just not going to give a free handout. But I think I would support some type of contribution to service. We have it in the military. We have it for JAG officers. We have it for certain skills we need in the military. So if you come aboard and you serve our country, then we have loan forgiveness programs that so many years you serve, you get, you know, $10,000 off your loans, whatever it might be. So there needs to be a value system that you do something for something. We got to get beyond free handouts, and so that won't be something I would support. But I would support some type of education program that would make sense. The second part of your question was on the standardized testing.
Correct.
Right. So I don't have a problem with testing that makes sense to prepare students for the 21st century, especially since they're going to face with the standardized tests to get into graduate school, to get into law school, you know, whatever upper level school, even colleges, right? So I'm going to support some type of testing that may be in place that makes sense, that will prepare them, right? But I wouldn't support just testing across the board, because it's a money-making machine, and we feel that it makes it difficult. We know it may be difficult for some students over other students, but I think all students need to be prepared for the 21st century. And I think you know, you got to face the music somewhere. And so I think you can't get around it. But I think what we need to do is put more money in our public school system, not take it out. And because not every student is going to be able to afford a private school. Not every student is going to have the privilege to go to private school. And there are a lot of students, a huge sector of our population. And I think we shore up our public schools. We make sure we have the best teachers. We make sure to have the best pay raises. We make sure we have the best facilities that compete directly with the private schools. So we are taking care of education. And once we do that, then that minimizes the need for all the standardized testing because those students are prepared.
Okay. And so same question, John.
Well, it's a big question. I mean, Texas is in a financial crisis in the educational system. You know, starting back in 2011, the Republican-led legislature and governor stripped out about $5.4 billion in educational funding to the public schools. And that was when we had a surplus in our economy. We had a full rainy day fund. And for some reason, they decided to strip out this funding. In my opinion, there is a Republican agenda to bankrupt public school, for lack of a better word, so that the schools are having to do with less. The teachers are not getting the pay increases they need. They're not getting the medical insurance paid at a rate that's reasonable for their salary. Their retirement benefits are being targeted. And I think all this is being done with the idea that at some point the Republicans have an idea they want to privatize as much of the educational system as they possibly can. And so my agenda would be that we need to fully fund public education throughout the state. No matter which zip code you live in, public education needs to be fully funded. You know, our teachers are, you know, I ran into a teacher the other day on the campaign trail. In fact, she was going to vote just the other day and said that in her household, they've established a budget for this teacher to pull out of her income to pay for school supplies. And that is just, that's unreasonable in our society. You know, teachers are one of the most important building blocks in our children's lives, and to show them this kind of disrespect is fundamentally flawed. So I would fully fund public education. We need to get it back. It's never been refunded since the money was stripped out. What was the second part of the question?
Standardized testing.
Standardized testing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so standardized testing is out of control. I mean, I've had 5 kids go through the public school system, and they spend an inordinate amount of time worrying about these standardized tests and not doing some of the things that we had the opportunity to do when we were in school. You know, I had great teachers that had the freedom to teach. And I still remember those teachers. You know, I remember the teachers that were passionate about a piece of literature or passionate about poetry. And they can't do that now. They don't have time to be creative and work on their subject in a way that is enlightening to the children anymore. You know, and not only that, it's causing a lot of anxiety to our children. And so I think that we need to have some sort of benchmarks. You know, they don't need to be every year. I mean, that's outrageous. But once we get past these benchmarks, we really need to invest in our school system, and we need to stop some of this mandatory testing.
Okay. So tailored a bit differently for you, because it applies a little bit differently. So it's still on the focus of education, because earlier when you introduced yourself, you said that there are people within the county and your precinct that don't know who the constable is or what the constable does. So that in turn falls in education. And just curious as to what your stance is, how you hope to educate the public on your role and what you're going to do. So it's,
Okay, just making sure. Well, I'm gonna key off a little bit of their questions too. It's kind of hard going at the end when you're sitting with 2 guys. And, they got the same idea. You're just reformulating the way you're going to say it because they said it. I am in favor of public education. I think a point that John was hitting off at is right now teachers are teaching students to take a test. You have a lot of things that are taken out of school. I have 2 sons in elementary right now. One son in 5th grade, and he asked me, "Daddy, show me how to sign my name in cursive." Cursive was taken out of school. And if you think about all this country's historical documents, they're written in cursive. So right now you have a lot of educators that are handicapped that don't have the ability to teach those life skills, because guess what? We have to teach you guys to pass this test, because if you don't pass the test, it's going to negatively reflect that teacher, and she's going to get a bad rating. When I was a child, we had a program. I'm a product of HISD schools. We had a program called DARE, and what DARE did, it was a drug program, but it also...
Drug Abuse Resistance Education.
There you go, you remember. Okay. And what the DARE program did was, taught us about drugs, but it also introduced us into law enforcement. Not to be scared of that officer, but that officer is your friend. And that's what I'm trying to do, go back to those grassroots with law enforcement, teach the youth that we are their friend. Because if you look at the news now, we're put in a light that we're the bad guy, Don't stop, don't shoot me, officer, don't shoot me. So we have to get back in the schools, back in the community, make deals with these teachers, deals with these principals, so we can get back in there and start some type of program to put in place that students are welcome when they see the police officer.
Okay, all right. So one of the other things that we definitely want to touch on, it's been throughout the media, television, is political corruption, right? That's another issue that Texans, one of the issues that Texans feel are important in this election. So, when we talk about political corruption, there's one particular case that stands to mind, and that's Citizens United. Mm-hmm. Right? So just as a little bit of background, and I'll phrase it in the question as well, right? Do you support or would you seek to overturn Citizens United? And Citizens United, which held that freedom of speech prohibited government from restricting independent political expenditures by nonprofit corporation as well as profit corporations, labor unions, and other associations. So we know that Texans feel that money through corporations, private, or for-profit, not-profit, labor, influences the decisions that our lawmakers are making. So what is your stance on the decision for Citizens United? Would you seek to overturn it? And what would you do to help alleviate this sense that money is eroding our political system?
Quentin, it's not anything new, right? So it depends on who's in Congress, and that's the reason why we have the right people in Congress. So I can tell you if the Congress was blue, right, so on both the Senate and the House, then we'll have the necessary reforms. The reason why I say that, because what you find in most Democratic candidates is that we don't raise a lot of money from the soft money, right? And for especially challengers like the ones who are here, most money comes from regular citizens like you and other folks who work hard every day and make a living. My opponent obviously has raised well over 90% of his money from PAC money, commonly called PAC money, and that's the soft money. And so there's no restrictions on that, and people can form a PAC, and it's okay. It's a real challenge because they're going to fight because they're going to claim it violates the First Amendment, will not allow them to do it. So on the one hand, we in Congress can put rules in place, right, and control it. And there are some rules in place, but when we attempt to end it, then you have the balance of our branches that the judicial branch will weigh in that is a violation of the First Amendment. So we're back to square one. But I would definitely support the minimal amount of soft money, right, from PACs or whatever that a candidate could get. I'm also going to support term limits. I think where you eliminate the problem is what we have in the city of Houston. It works in the city. No city council person can get very comfortable because in 3 terms they have to go find something else to do. I think in Congress it's the same problem, and probably across the country. But if we have term limits where a congressman can only serve 5 terms, so 10 years, I think that's adequate, and a senator 2 terms, that's 12 years, then that minimizes this problem. But by the time you get there, and you're not going to get cozy with the lobbyists and then all the PAC money, You know, they know you're going to be there for a mission, and in 10 years you're going to have to go do something else.
All right. So, well, before we go to you, John, I believe we have a caller.
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Good evening. This is Venus. I had a question for Lance. So my question is, I heard you say that you wanted the constable office to be progressive. What is your education background, and what training do you plan to offer your officers to achieve your goal?
That is a very good question. And Venus, we thank you for calling and participating. So, Lance?
My educational background, I'm a graduate of, I'm a product of HISD, a graduate of Madison High School, earned my associates from Houston Community College, earned my bachelor's in criminal justice from Lamar University. I'm a graduate of Texas Constable Leadership College out of Sam Houston. I'm a field training officer, I'm a mental health officer, and I'm an instructor. And what I want to offer to my officers is more progression, I'm sorry, first time on TV. As an instructor, when I first got into law enforcement, I had instructions given by people that really didn't know about this subject. I had males telling me how it was to be a female. And I think the best perspective I can get from being a female is from a female. So I became an instructor and started to design my own curricula. And I think right now with Brazoria County being as much multicultural and diverse as it is, that I can get the citizens of Brazoria County to assist me in training these officers, because at the end of the day, we're working with the citizens of Brazoria County. So if I put together cultural diversity, I want to bring in, we have a huge Indian population. It's a huge Indian population. So if I could bring in someone from that culture and that background to speak for my officers for an hour, tell me what we need to know and what encountering this background. Huge Hispanic population. If I could bring in someone from the Hispanic community, could you give me an insight what you guys want to do, or how could we better serve you? So my thing is progression. So I need to get all my officers trained to that point where they're progressive and can serve the citizens better. I'm sorry, first time on TV, of Brazoria County.
Okay. Venus, are you still there? Okay. Well,
I am.
Okay.
It's kind of breaking up a little bit, but I can hear you.
So thank you for calling in. We do appreciate it. So, and thank you, Lance.
Thank you. Thank you, Venus.
All right, so now, John,
Right.
kind of segue back into what we were talking about with influence and money into politics and the system. So, Texans obviously feel that way in the poll.
Right.
You either can
Right.
agree or disagree. And so how do you feel that plays here in Texas? Do you feel it's in play? And what would you do to stop it or prevent it?
Well, first of all, I am 100% behind all the efforts to abolish Citizens United. And anything that we can do in the state of Texas to further that philosophy, to try to get a lot of this corporate money and big donors out of politics, I think we need to do. Politics is inherently corrupt. I mean, there's just no doubt about it at this point. Everyone spends almost the entire elected cycle trying to raise money so that they can compete during the next cycle. I mean, that's the reason we're sitting here, the three of us, right? We have our opponents don't need to come out and talk to the people. They don't need to come out and talk to people because they can flood them with ads, pay it on TV, by mailers that are sent to the home, by consultants and robocalls and just flooding the community with a message that we can't compete with because they're raising all this soft money. We have been trying to engage Mr. Thompson, for example, in a debate for months and have been unable to do it because he doesn't need to explain himself to the people. He doesn't need to explain his policies or his positions because he can send out this fluff that comes through his marketing and sell himself that way, And so we need to do something that's going to limit corporate donations, contributions across the board. I think that there ought to be caps on corporate donations that are similar to those of individuals. In Texas, we basically have no limits at all right now. And so we need to put in some limits on campaign contributions at the state level. And we need to do something to make sure that everyone's voice is heard, not just those people who are funded by the big corporations.
So, again, to just make sure we understand the concepts here, one would also argue that perhaps we talk about soft money, we talk about PACs. There's different ways to track who contributes to those PACs. People, individuals can also contribute to PACs.
True.
So the fact that those candidates have maybe a larger pool of money to invest into their campaigns, someone also could argue that maybe the quality of the work that they're doing and what they're producing is, they're in support of that. So it's not that they're corrupt, it's that they have done a good job and that they're getting the money to do the work that they need to do. And so is it woe on me because I can't afford to send out literature or make calls?
Well, if I could chime in on that, when these candidates get these large sums of money with anything, money's going to corrupt. And I think at that point you never get to know the true candidate, because when you guys put on forums like this, as you can see, we're the only three that's here. A lot of people don't have to be here. You don't get to know the true person or the true essence of that person, because I can send out a mailer or put up a sign, and that's all you know about that person. You never get to know them. And corruption is in everything. You have too many politicians that go in office worth 100,000. They leave office worth 10 million. So you have corruption in money, and like an issue that John's facing with the dump off of 521, where citizens are getting this ditch. You go to his competitor's background, he's getting funded by these people, so it will behoove him to act like it doesn't exist. So when you get in this field, money does corrupt, so it should be caps.
So, yes, okay, I think the consensus, like obviously Texans, the majority of Texans feel that there is some sort of corruption. But I do want to note that Representative Thompson could not be here. He had a personal commitment.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to note that. Okay.
Well, and I appreciate that. And the problem is that when you cannot find a day or a time to speak to the people in a format that allows for some tough questions, that allows for some back and forth, that allows for people to call in and ask questions. When you can rely purely on PR, just like Coca-Cola does, or just like any other big company does, you find yourself not accountable to the people anymore. I mean, the public, the political finance machine is out of control. Everyone knows it. Depending on which party is in power, the other one's always crying about how corrupt it is. But when they get in power, they want to keep it the way it is because they're getting all the money put into their bank accounts. And so if we're going to be intellectually honest on this point, if we believe that it has the potential to corrupt, if it leaves a question about your elected officials, about who they're really responsible to. Are you responsible to the owners of the dump? He's talking about the Blue Ridge dump outside of Shadow Creek and outside of Pearland. Are you going to be responsible to the corporation that's making contributions to your election campaign, or are you going to be responsible to the people? And it just really creates at least a perception that there is split loyalties there. And so something has to be done with the finance, political finance system. Something has to be done with it. Real limits need to be put in place.
Okay, so when you say limits, that kind of triggers the next thing we talk about, which is a totally different issue. But we talk about limits, and what limit will we as citizens be able to withstand on insurance premiums? There's notes that the premiums are going to go up due to the health care law that was passed, the Affordable Care Act. And so we're going to touch on, let me come back to you, Mark, because in Texas, we have one of the lowest insured rates in the U.S. So currently, more than 4 million Texans are uninsured, with some over 600,000 children lacking health insurance. And some of the major providers have recently left the exchange, the federal exchange. Texas currently has no state exchange. Mm-hmm. So are you in favor, one, of a state exchange, and would you repeal or replace the healthcare system known as Obamacare?
Okay, so first let me answer the question. So would I support the state exchange? Yes, I would. The reason is because one of the things we cannot overlook with the Affordable Care Act, all right, and that's what I call it because that's the title of the act, not Obamacare. So that's something that's conjured by our opponents. That's part of the problem why we have the issues we have. And that's the reason why people are ready to make a change and vote them out of office. Tied to the rhetoric. Rhetoric gets you nowhere, right? It doesn't pay a light bill, doesn't pay a phone bill, whatever it might be. And so we got to have real people who are about the real issues and focus on what makes sense, and that benefits the folks back home in District 22. So the Affordable Care Act, yes. So for some reason Texas decided to opt out, you know, and so I would support state exchanges because the big piece of the Affordable Care Act we can't overlook, and what I said earlier, is the pre-existing conditions. There's not, you know, most of us cannot go find health care and they would accept a pre-existing condition. And so that was a big plus with the Act. That's going to be rare to find outside of that. Most of us cannot afford. So, you know, people who work today and they just get displaced, right? They have to go on COBRA. Our military veterans, so they serve in the reserves, right? If they once they finish their obligation, say 30-year obligation, retire, they will not, if they retire at age 52, and typically that's the age, right, for those who serve and say they serve, you know, 20, 30 years, and so they will not receive VA benefits until age 60. There's about an 8-year gap. Most of us not aware, do you know, that the military, so the system we have in place today, basically priced them out. So they are no different than anybody else, that if you get displaced at the office, you have to rely on COBRA. Well, the military has some very similar, like COBRA, that they purposely price them out of the market, and they give them 18 months. So they leave from TRICARE to this COBRA-type program, and they give them 18 months, and they raise the prices so high, they know they can't afford it. And they tell them. You call them on the line, they tell you, say, yes, is purposely to price you out. They don't want to say that to so many words, but yes.
So what would you do?
Well, I just said I would support an exchange, right? The reason why I would is so that you have something you can fall back on, right? Okay. So if I have military veterans who have served the country, just retired, and they've been using TRICARE, they get displaced, they can't afford this COBRA program. Now, the military try to fill in some gap, some type of filler, right, you tap into, which is similar to like an exchange program. So I would support some type of exchange program. On the Affordable Care Act, no, I don't think we repeal it just so that the Republicans come up with something, which is nothing, really. They were against it the first time and couldn't come up with something. And so what makes us think they can come up with something now? What I would do is support small businesses and remove the penalties that are currently in place for those who don't participate and replace those with incentives. It's because I think it's a good law that will support our small businesses, and I think we need to tap into it. I think we put too much rhetoric behind it, right? I think the people who, you know, Blue Cross just announced recently they were leaving because they would lose so much money and they were going to raise the premiums, you know, out of the roof. Well, I think, you know, it comes back to the fundamental of their business model, right? Is it because of the folks in exchange or some other reasons, right? So, you know, you got companies that in it, you know, it was good when they got in, they probably raked in a lot of incentives, and now when the incentives have gone, they may be exiting. We don't know all the reasons, right? But I support we need to have something because it support the rest of America that don't have anything. And I think, you know, if you can't, so most people in my district, right? Mm-hmm. So only about 20,000 have no type of insurance. I think we have about another 40%, so about 20%, about 20,000 have no insurance, about 40% or less are on a government type of program. The rest are on, you know, they have insurance from their employers. And so they're not affected by this. So when we go around and we have all this noise about the Affordable Care Act, especially in District 22, that's all it is. It's all noise.
Okay, so what we want to do is we only have a few moments left. Okay. So what I'll allow you to do, in essence of the previous conversations, is make a little noise for yourself and leave the audience with, if you could, in a minute and a half, you know, something that you want to tell them the polls are closed today, but they'll be open for the next couple of days for early voting. So, John, I'll start with you.
Well, and very quickly, I wanted to address the issue of the exchanges. I mean, one of the reasons
1 minute.
that yeah, one of the reasons that we have so many people uninsured in the state of Texas and that the insurance premiums are skyrocketing is because the Republicans have refused to participate in the Affordable Care Act. We're paying money into the federal government, and we're not getting anything out of that. It's ridiculous. You know, they've said they've never support Obama. They do everything they can to shut him down. And they've done that. They've cut the nose to spite the face with the health care. It's causing a crisis in the hospital districts. And so we need to do something to deal with this in a better way. We need to be reasonable about the way we approach the federal government and the way we have relations with the federal government. But as a closing statement, I mean, I am a progressive thinker. I think it's time that we brought progressive policies to North Brazoria County. For far too long, this county has been ruled by people that are out of touch with the community. We live in a very diverse community, people from all different countries, religious backgrounds, that are all vital and active members of the community. And to let the Republican Party continue to disparage the people in our community, I think we have to stand up and do something about it. And that is something that I think needs to be done. No more hate politics, no more fear mongering. We need to get out and start dealing with the issues at hand.
Okay. Lance Willis?
What I'm running on is I want to bring more forward-thinking law enforcement to Brazoria County. I want to bring more progressive, not aggressive, policing to Brazoria County. I want to make the constable office known. I want to make the constable office move into the 21st century. For far too long, this office has stayed stagnant, and a lot of people didn't know it exists. And under my leadership, I want to bring it into the 21st century. Harris County and Fort Bend County have laid a great blueprint of what a constable office can do. And I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, but I want to bring some of those positive attributes to Brazoria County so we can be more progressive in the office of constable. I'm Lance Willis, running for Brazoria County, Precinct 4 Constable.
And so you had the last word on the health care, so I'll give you 30 seconds.
Wow. Okay, so that would make this quick.
Yes.
Well, I'm Mark Gibson, who's running for Congress in District 22. It covers 3 counties, and in these few seconds I have, I ask for your vote. I ask for your confidence to be your next congressman. My advice to you, my call to you, call to action is you go out and vote. If you have not voted, early voting continues this weekend into next week, and also on Election Day. And I want you to vote early. I want you to vote for me. You know, we stand for the things that matter most to you, from our vets, small businesses, safety, health care. Those things matter, and I need your support. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. And so this will conclude this edition of Public Affairs, Public Access. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you at the polls.